sleeping in ancient times. Calm history for sleep. Let your breath slow down. Let the weight of the day release itself from your shoulders and your hands, and the quiet space behind your eyes where thoughts tend to linger long after they are welcome. There is nothing here that needs your attention. There is nowhere you need to be. There is only this voice and this story, and a journey back through time to a place so vivid and so alive that standing in its streets, even now, even across the distance of nearly 2,000 years, you can feel the warmth of it on your skin. We are going to Pompeii, not the Pompeii of the archaeologists, not the silent, excavated city of pale stone and careful signage that exists today beneath the shadow of the mountain. We are going to the living city, the city before, the city as it was on an ordinary morning in the year 79 AD. Close your eyes and let the world around you soften. Feel the warmth first, the particular warmth of a late summer morning in the south of Italy. Not the sharp, demanding heat of midday, but the early warmth. The warmth that arrives with the sun as it clears the rooftops and falls into the streets in long, angled shafts of gold. That settles onto the stone pavements and the plaster walls and the terracotta roof tiles and simply stays there, radiating gently back into the air, making the whole city feel like something that has been warmed from within. The stone beneath your feet is smooth and slightly warm already. Large, flat slabs of gray volcanic basalt, worn to a gentle shine by the passage of many thousands of feet over many decades, their surfaces uneven in the way of old stone streets, slightly hollowed in the center where the foot traffic is heaviest, rising toward the edges where the stepping stones cross to the opposite pavement. The air around you is layered with smell. Closest and most immediate, the warm, yeasty smell of bread baking somewhere nearby. The ovens of the city's bakeries have been burning since long before dawn, and the smell of their work has settled into the streets of the surrounding neighborhood like a permanent resident. Rich and slightly sweet, the smell of grain transformed by heat into something fundamental and entirely comforting. Beneath it, the smell of the city itself, of stone and plaster warmed by the sun, of the water that runs continuously in the fountain at the nearby intersection, clean and slightly mineral. The smell of water that has traveled a long way through stone channels from the mountains above the city to arrive here, cool and clear, at this corner of this street. And beneath all of that, the deeper, more complex smell of a city fully alive, of the market stalls already open along the main street, of olives in their large clay jars, of fish from the morning catch laid out on stone counters, of the herbs and spices that a vendor has arranged in small cloth bundles near the entrance of her stall, each one releasing its particular fragrance into the warm morning air. Pompeii sits in the region of Campania, in the south of the Italian peninsula, on a raised plateau of ancient lava overlooking the Bay of Naples. The sea is visible from the higher streets of the city on clear days like this one, a deep, luminous blue at the edge of the world, catching the morning light in a way that makes it look almost solid, almost like a second sky laid flat along the horizon. And behind the city, to the north, the broad, sloping profile of Mount Vesuvius rises against the pale morning sky, its summit softened this morning by a thin veil of high cloud, its lower slopes a deep, cultivated green, covered in vineyards and orchards that produce some of the finest wine and fruit in the entire Roman Empire. The mountain is simply there, as it has always been, as familiar to the people of Pompeii as the street they live on. as unremarkable as the sun that rises behind it each morning. The year is 79 AD. The Emperor Titus now sits upon the throne of Rome. It is a time of relative peace and considerable prosperity throughout the empire. Trade flows freely along the roads and the sea lanes. The markets are well supplied. The harvests have been generous. In Pompeii, as in cities across the Roman world, life is conducted largely in public. The streets are the living rooms of the city. Even now, in the early morning, before the heat of the day has fully established itself, the streets are already alive with movement and sound. The creak of wooden shutters being folded back from shop fronts, the scrape of heavy amphorae being moved across stone floors, the sound of voices calling to one another across the street in the easy, unhurried way of people who know each other well and have no particular reason to be formal. A cart moves along the main street, its iron-rimmed wheels producing a low, rolling rumble on the basalt paving stones, the sound bouncing off the plaster walls on either side, then fading as the cart turns a corner and disappears into the network of side streets beyond. Somewhere further along the street, the sound of a fountain, that soft, continuous sound of water falling into a stone basin, steady and gentle and entirely pleasant, the kind of sound that the ear registers and then releases. That becomes, after a few minutes, simply part of the texture of the place, present always, noticed rarely, but missed immediately if it were to stop. The walls of the buildings around you are painted in deep, rich colors, terracotta red and ochre yellow, and a warm, earthy white that glows in the morning light. Many of them carry painted inscriptions, notices and announcements painted in careful red and black lettering onto the smooth plaster surface. Above the street, the upper floors of the buildings lean slightly toward one another, narrowing the strip of sky overhead to a warm, pale blue ribbon edged with the irregular roof lines of tiles and cornices and the occasional potted plant set out on an upper windowsill to catch the morning sun. A cat sits on one of the stepping stones in the middle of the street, washing its face with the absolute, unhurried concentration that cats bring to personal grooming. It pauses to look at you briefly, finds you uninteresting, and returns to its work. This is a city of perhaps 11,000 people, going about their days with the easy confidence of people who live in one of the most prosperous and comfortable cities in the Roman world. A city of merchants and bakers and politicians and craftspeople, of fishermen and farmers and priests and children running through narrow streets in the warm Campanian sun. It is a city that knows how to live, that takes its pleasures seriously, that has 2 theaters and an amphitheater and multiple sets of public baths, that has temples to a dozen different deities, that has a forum of genuine grandeur surrounded by civic buildings of real architectural ambition. We are not going to the forum tonight. We are not going to the temples or the amphitheater or the grand houses of the wealthy. We are going to the market streets, to the ordinary, wonderfully alive commercial heart of the city, where a woman named Lucia has been setting up her stall since before the sun was fully over the rooftops. Her name means light. She is a vendor of olives and bread and the small household goods that the people of Pompeii need every day, and come to her corner of the market to find. She is not wealthy. She is not powerful. She does not live in one of the painted houses with the marble floors and the garden courtyards. She lives above her stall, in the 2 small rooms on the upper floor of the building at the corner of the street where she has sold her goods for the past 12 years. Her life is ordinary by the standards of her city, and extraordinary by almost any other measure. She knows the names of her customers. She knows which families prefer the sharper olives and which prefer the milder ones. She knows who is likely to be in a hurry and who is likely to want to talk. She knows the rhythms of the street, the way Leif knows the rhythms of his fjord, the way Marcus knows the rhythms of his oven. She is, in the truest sense, part of the fabric of her city. And today, on this warm and entirely ordinary morning, in the late summer of 79 AD, she is already at work. But first, let us arrive properly. Let the city settle around you. Let the warmth of the morning find you, and the smell of bread and olives and warm stone reach you, and the sounds of 11,000 people beginning their day fill the air in the easy, unhurried way of a city that has been doing this for a very long time. You begin walking, not with any particular destination in mind, not with any urgency or purpose pulling you forward. Simply walking, the way you walk when the morning is warm and the street is interesting and there is no particular reason to be anywhere other than exactly where you are. The street beneath your feet is paved with large, irregular slabs of dark volcanic basalt, each one fitted against its neighbors with the careful, unhurried precision of Roman road building. The surface worn smooth by decades of foot traffic, by the daily passage of sandaled feet and bare feet, and the hooves of donkeys and the iron-rimmed wheels of delivery carts. The stones are already warm beneath your feet, the sun having reached this street perhaps an hour ago, working its way down the plaster walls from the roof line to the pavement in the slow, methodical way of morning sun in a narrow street. You can feel the warmth through the soles of your sandals, a gentle, radiant heat rising from the stone. Not the sharp, demanding heat of midday, but the early warmth, the warmth that promises rather than insists. The street is not wide, perhaps 4 or 5 paces from wall to wall, narrowing further at the intersections where the stepping stones cross from one pavement to the other. Large, raised stones set at intervals across the road surface, high enough to keep a pedestrian's feet above the water and waste that collects in the street during rain, spaced wide enough apart to allow cartwheels to pass between them without difficulty. You step up onto the raised pavement on the left side of the street and walk in the shade of the building fronts. The buildings on either side rise 2 stories above the street, their ground floors given over entirely to shops and workshops and food stalls, their upper floors residential, belonging to the shopkeepers themselves in some cases, rented out to the city's working population in others. The facades of these buildings are plastered and painted, the plaster a warm, slightly textured cream or white at the upper levels, deepening to the rich terracotta red and ochre yellow that the Romans favor for their street-level walls. The paint is vivid and well-maintained, the colors clean and strong in the morning light, giving the street a warmth and vitality that bare stone could never achieve. Between the painted surfaces, the walls carry their text, notices painted in careful, even lettering, red paint on white plaster, black paint on red, the announcements of the city's daily life rendered permanent on the walls of its streets. Here, the name of a candidate for local office, accompanied by a brief endorsement from his neighbors, his virtues listed in the clipped, confident language of Roman civic life. There, an advertisement for a gladiatorial games to be held in the amphitheater. The date, the number of pairs of fighters, the name of the sponsor, all set out with the matter-of-fact directness of a people for whom public spectacle is simply a normal part of the calendar. And here, smaller and more personal, a name, and beneath it, a single line. The kind of message that has been left on walls in every city and every age. Brief and entirely human. You read it as you pass and move on. The shops are opening around you. Each shop occupies the full width of its ground floor frontage, its entrance a wide open gap in the wall, fitted with heavy wooden panels that slide into slots in the stone threshold and the lintel above. These panels have been folded back this morning and secured against the side walls, leaving the entire front of the shop open to the street. The interiors are visible as you pass, each one a single compact room, its walls painted in the deep reds and yellows and greens of Roman interior decoration, its floor tiled or flagged, its shelves and counters laden with whatever the shop sells, a bakery, its stone counter built out into the pavement, the circular openings of its large storage jars set into the counter surface in the Roman fashion, each jar containing a different type of grain or dried goods, the smell of the bakery reaching you before you are level with its entrance, warm and yeasty and deeply comforting. The ovens at the back of the room still radiating the heat of the morning's baking, a stack of round loaves cooling on a wooden shelf near the counter, a wine shop, its walls lined with amphorae stacked horizontally in wooden racks, the proprietor moving among them with a small clay lamp, checking the seals, making note of what needs to be brought up from the storage room below. The sharp, slightly fruity smell of wine cutting through the morning air as you pass, a fuller's workshop where cloth is cleaned and processed, the large treading vats visible through the open front, their contents pale and slightly steaming in the cool of the morning. The smell of the workshop particular and unmistakable, the smell of a process that is essential and entirely unglamorous. You pass it quickly and breathe the cleaner air of the street beyond with quiet appreciation. Further along, a thermopolium. This is the Roman equivalent of a street food counter, a shop built entirely around the preparation and sale of hot food and drink to be consumed on the spot or carried away, its L-shaped counter of rendered masonry built out into the pavement, its surface inlaid with fragments of colored marble, its large ceramic vessels set into openings in the counter, each one containing a different prepared food, kept warm by the coals burning in the cavity below. The smell from the thermopolium is extraordinary, rich and layered and entirely inviting. Lentils cooked with cumin and coriander, a thick stew of chickpeas with herbs, something involving fish sauce and wine that is more complex and more interesting than it sounds. The smell of coals and warm pottery, and the particular savoriness of food that has been cooking slowly since before dawn. A small queue has already formed at the counter, 3 or 4 people waiting with their bowls, exchanging the brief, comfortable conversation of people who see each other every morning at this same counter, whose days begin in this same small ritual of warmth and food and the first easy conversation of the morning. You pause nearby and simply absorb it. The sounds of the street are layering around you now, building gradually as the morning advances and more of the city comes to life. The low, constant murmur of voices, not loud, not urgent, the conversational hum of a city going about its business, rising and falling in the easy rhythm of a place where people are comfortable with one another and comfortable with themselves. The sound of something being ground, a heavy rhythmic sound from somewhere inside one of the buildings nearby, the slow rotation of a mill, grain being reduced to flour with the patient, continuous effort of a donkey walking its circular path around the millstone. The sound of a child somewhere above you, on an upper balcony, playing some private game that involves a repeated tapping sound and occasional bursts of commentary in the high, clear voice of a child who has not yet learned to moderate their volume for the benefit of those nearby. The sound of the fountain at the intersection ahead. You reach it now, A large rectangular stone basin set into the pavement at the corner where two streets meet. Its water fed by a lead pipe that emerges from the wall above at the height of your chest. The water falling in a continuous arc into the basin below, splashing and spreading and settling. The sound of it filling the intersection with a soft, clean, entirely pleasant white noise that absorbs the harder edges of the city sounds around it. The basin is full and clear, the water moving in slow circles from the point of entry to the overflow channel at the far end. A thin green line of algae along the stone at the waterline, evidence of the water's continuous presence here. You lean slightly over the basin and feel the cool air that rises from the water's surface, a brief, pleasant contrast to the warmth of the morning around you. A woman fills a clay jug at the pipe, holds it steady beneath the flow with the practiced ease of someone who does this every morning. The jug fills quickly. She lifts it to her hip and turns and walks back up the side street without looking back. You straighten and look along the street ahead. It opens slightly here at the intersection, the building stepping back just enough to create a small widening in the road, a natural gathering point where a few people have stopped to talk, where a man is setting out a small display of goods on a cloth laid across the pavement, arranging his items with the careful attention of someone who understands that presentation matters. Even here, even at this scale, the sky above the street is a pale, clear blue, the particular blue of a late summer morning in southern Italy. Not the deep blue of midday, but the softer, more luminous blue of early morning, still carrying the memory of the night's cool in its upper reaches. The sun is climbing, its angle steeper now than when you first arrived in the street. The shadows that fell long and angled across the pavements an hour ago are shortening, drawing back toward the base of the walls, concentrating into narrow strips of shade that will, by midday, disappear entirely. The warmth on your face and arms is gentle and entirely pleasant, the kind of warmth that asks nothing of you. That simply is. That has been falling on these streets and these walls and the people walking through them every summer morning for as long as the city has existed. You turn a corner and the street opens before you into the market. It is not grand. It is not the Forum with its marble columns and its civic monuments and its carefully maintained sense of official importance. It is something better than that. It is ordinary. It is alive. It is the market street of a working city on a working morning. Its stalls set up along both sides of the pavement. Its vendors calling out to passers-by with the easy confidence of people in good locations with reliable products. It smell a concentrated version of everything you have been smelling since you arrived in the city. Bread and olives and fish and herbs and warm stone, and the faint, sweet smell of the fruit stall at the far end of the row, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, at the corner stall with the large clay jars of olives and the baskets of bread and the small household items arranged on the counter with the careful, practiced eye of someone who has been doing this for 12 years, Lucia. You walk toward the corner stall and stop a few paces away, close enough to observe, far enough to give the morning its space, and you watch Lucia work. She is a woman of middle years, somewhere in her late 30s, though the outdoor life of a Roman market vendor has given her the kind of presence that belongs more to a place than to an age. Settled and warm and entirely at ease with the world immediately around her. She is not tall, but she carries herself with the upright, unhurried confidence of someone who has stood at this same corner for 12 years and knows every inch of it, every crack in the pavement, every angle of the morning light, every regular customer by name and habit and preference. Her hair is dark and pulled back from her face and secured beneath a length of linen cloth in the practical fashion of a working woman who needs her hair out of her way and has no particular interest in elaborate arrangements at this hour of the morning. She wears a tunic of undyed linen, loose and long, belted at the waist with a strip of darker cloth. Over it, a lighter wrap of pale wool that she has pulled around her shoulders against the early morning cool. Her feet in simple leather sandals whose soles are thick and well worn from years of standing on stone. Her hands are her most expressive feature, quick and capable and constantly in motion, moving between the jars and the baskets and the small items on the counter with the fluid, overlapping efficiency of hands that know their work so completely that they no longer need to be consciously directed. Lucia has been awake since long before the sun. Her day begins not at the stall, but in the small room above it, where she rises in the darkness of the early morning and moves through her preparations with the quiet, methodical efficiency of someone whose routine is so deeply established that it requires no thought, only the doing of it. She lights the small clay oil lamp on the table by her sleeping mat, its flame small and steady, casting a warm circle of amber light across the low ceiling and the plain plastered walls of the room. The room is simple. A sleeping mat on a low wooden frame, a table, a wooden chest against the wall where she keeps her clothing and the few personal items that constitute her private life. A shelf above the table holding a small terracotta figure of Vesta, the goddess of the heart, before which Lucia pauses each morning for a brief, private moment of acknowledgement. Not a long ceremony, not an elaborate ritual, simply a pause, a moment of quiet attention directed toward the small figure on the shelf. A few words spoken under her breath in the easy, familiar tone of someone addressing a presence they have known for a long time. Then a small offering, a pinch of dried herbs placed in the shallow dish at the figure's base. Then she is moving again. She descends the narrow wooden staircase that connects her room to the storage area behind the stall. The stairs creak in the same places they always creak. The third step from the top and the second from the bottom sounds so familiar they are almost comforting, the signature of a place entirely known. The storage area is cool and dim, its walls lined with shelving on which the stock for the day is arranged in careful order. The olive jars first, large ceramic vessels of varying sizes, each one sealed with a cloth cover tied around the neck, their contents sourced from a farm in the hills above the city. Delivered twice a week by a supplier Lucia has dealt with for 8 years, whose olives she trusts completely and whose pricing she negotiates with calm, practiced firmness each time. There are 3 varieties this morning. The small, dark olives cured in brine, their flavor sharp and clean. The larger green olives preserved in oil with herbs, their flavor rounder and more complex, and a smaller quantity of the oil-cured black olives, soft and rich and slightly sweet, that certain customers come specifically for and would be deeply disappointed not to find. Lucia lifts the cloth from each jar and checks the contents with a brief, assessing look and a quick dip of her finger. Not tasting, simply feeling the texture and temperature of the brine or oil, reading the condition of her stock with the instinctive accuracy of someone who has been doing this every morning for years. Everything is as it should be. She carries the jars up to the stall one at a time, setting each one into its designated position on the stone counter with the careful, practiced movement of someone who knows exactly how much these jars weigh and exactly how to manage that weight without spilling or straining. The counter is a long slab of stone built into the front of the building, its surface smooth and slightly cool to the touch. Its front face decorated with a painted panel, faded now from years of sun and weather but still recognizable as a depiction of the goods on offer. Olives, bread, a few small household items arranged with the aspirational tidiness of commercial art. Into the circular openings cut into the counter surface, Lucia settles the 3 olive jars. They fit snugly, held in place by the stone around them, keeping them upright and stable and accessible to customers who want to examine the contents before committing to a purchase. The bread comes next. It has been collected this morning from the bakery 2 streets away, a arrangement of long standing. Lucia does not bake herself. She has neither the oven nor the inclination, but she has a reliable arrangement with the baker whose oven produces a consistent, well-made loaf that her customers have come to expect. She collected it on her way to open the stall this morning, carrying the basket of round loaves through the still quiet streets in the gray pre-dawn light. The warmth of the freshly baked bread rising through the cloth cover of the basket and warming her hands and arms in the cool morning air. The loaves are round and dense, made from wheat flour, their surfaces scored in the Roman fashion, each loaf marked with a pattern of lines that divides it into 8 portions, easy to break apart, easy to share, the smell of them still faintly present even now that they have cooled somewhat, a background warmth beneath the sharper smell of the olives. She arranges them in the wide, shallow basket on the right side of the counter, stacked loosely, accessible. Looking, she judges with a brief, satisfied glance exactly as they should look. The household goods occupy the left side of the counter and the shelf behind it. These are the small, practical items of Roman domestic life that people need regularly and prefer to buy close to home rather than making a special trip to the larger market near the Forum. Small clay lamps, compact and functional, their reservoirs pre-filled with oil, ready to use. Lucia sources these from a potter in the street behind the Forum, whose work is reliable and reasonably priced, and whose lamps have a pleasant, slightly decorative rim that customers tend to notice and appreciate. Bundles of dried herbs tied with thin strips of cloth, rosemary and thyme and bay, sourced from a woman who comes to the market twice a week from a farm outside the city walls, whose herbs are always fresh and always fragrant, and who charges a fair price without negotiation. Small ceramic containers of fish sauce, the ubiquitous Roman condiment that goes into almost everything and that no household can function without. Lucia buys these in quantity from a supplier near the port and sells them individually at the stall. It is not a glamorous product, but it is a reliable one. People always need it, and they always come back. A small selection of bronze needles, wrapped in a cloth and displayed in a shallow wooden tray, hair combs of bone and wood, a few small mirrors of polished bronze, the kind of items that people pick up while they are already at the stall buying olives, items that do not require a special trip but that sell steadily throughout the day, simply by being present and accessible and reasonably priced. When everything is arranged to her satisfaction, Lucia steps back and looks at the stall with the brief, assessing eye of someone checking their work. The jars are in their places. The bread is in its basket. The household goods are arranged with the clean, practical tidiness that makes them easy to see and easy to reach. The counter is wiped down. The cloth at the back of the stall is straightened. It is, she judges, ready. She pours herself a small cup of watered wine from the clay jug she keeps on the shelf behind the counter, drinks it slowly, standing behind her stall, looking out at the street. The street is brightening around her, the sun having climbed enough now to clear the rooftops on the eastern side of the street and fall directly onto the pavement and the stall fronts opposite, turning the ochre and terracotta of the painted walls to something richer and more luminous in the direct light. The sounds of the street are building, more voices now, more movement, the market coming properly to life around her as the other vendors complete their own preparations and the first customers of the morning begin to appear. A woman she knows stops at the stall, examines the olives, asks about the green ones. Lucia tells her about them with the quiet, confident ease of someone who knows her product completely. The woman selects a small quantity. The transaction is brief and entirely pleasant. Lucia wraps the olives in a folded piece of cloth and hands them across the counter. The woman drops a few small coins into the shallow dish on the counter without counting them. Both parties understand the price. It has not changed in months. The woman moves on, and Lucia turns to the next customer already approaching from the direction of the fountain. The morning has begun. The sun is warm on her shoulders now. The street is alive with movement and sound, and the particular, entirely pleasant energy of a Roman market morning in full swing. Lucia stands at her counter, her hands already in motion, her eyes already reading the street ahead for the next familiar face. This is her city. This is her corner. This is her morning, and it is, as it always is, entirely sufficient. The morning has deepened into midday, and the city around you has found its full rhythm. The sun is high now, its light falling straight down into the streets rather than at the long angled slant of the early hours. The shadows that stretched across the pavements this morning have contracted to narrow strips hugging the base of the walls, the stone of the street radiating the accumulated warmth of the morning back upward into the air. The market street is at its busiest. The vendors on either side of the street are all fully open now, their stalls spread to their fullest extent, their proprietors calling out to passing customers with the practiced, unhurried confidence of people who do this every day and have long since found the exact tone and volume that works best on this particular street at this particular hour. You drift through it slowly, letting the activity of the market settle around you like water around a stone. Lucia is at her counter. She has been here since before the sun cleared the rooftops, and she will be here until the light begins to fail in the late afternoon. This is the rhythm of her working day, long and steady and punctuated by the small, repeated transactions of market life, each one brief, each one complete in itself, each one contributing its small portion to the whole of the day's work. She is serving a customer now, a woman of perhaps 50, well dressed in the Roman fashion, a tunic of pale blue linen belted with a darker sash, her hair arranged with more care than most of the market's morning clientele, a household slave standing a respectful pace behind her, carrying the cloth bag into which the morning's purchases will be placed. The woman is examining the olives. She leans slightly over the counter and looks into the large jar of green olives with the careful, unhurried attention of someone who takes her household provisioning seriously, who has strong opinions about olives and is not shy about expressing them. Lucia stands on the other side of the counter with the patient, quietly attentive expression of a vendor who has served this particular customer many times, who knows that the examination will take as long as it takes and that the purchase will follow, as it always does. The woman asks a question about the oil in which the green olives are preserved. Lucia answers it directly and without elaboration, telling her what she needs to know. The farm the olives came from, the herbs used in the preserving oil, the length of time they have been curing. The woman nods. Satisfied, she selects the green olives, and a quantity of the small dark ones as well, and 2 of the round loaves from the basket. And after a brief pause during which she surveys the rest of the counter with the considering eye of someone who suspects there may be something else she needs, a small jar of fish sauce, the slave steps forward and opens the cloth bag. Lucia places each item inside with care. The transaction is concluded. The coins counted into the dish on the counter with the quiet, practiced click of a financial exchange, conducted many thousands of times before. The woman moves on, the slave follows, and Lucia is already turning toward the next customer. You step back from the stall and let the broader life of the market come into focus around you. The stall directly opposite Lucia's belongs to a man named Faustus, a vendor of fresh and dried fish. His counter spread with the morning's catch laid out on stone, glistening and cold, arranged with the particular care of a fishmonger who understands that presentation is half the sale. The smell from Faustus's stall is strong and clean and entirely characteristic of the sea, of salt and cold water, and the particular freshness of fish that has been out of the water only a few hours. It mingles with the smell of Lucia's olives and the bread from the bakery stall further along, and the warm stone of the pavement beneath your feet, into the layered, complex smell that is the particular signature of this market at this hour. Faustus is a large, cheerful man with a loud voice that he uses with evident pleasure. He calls out to passing customers with a creativity and persistence that Lucia watches from across the street with quiet, slightly amused respect. His technique is different from hers, more energetic, more theatrical, neither better nor worse, simply different, the product of a different temperament applied to the same essential task. A group of 3 women stop at his counter. He addresses each of them by name, makes a brief, good-natured observation about each of their households that produces laughter from 2 of them and a mock reproving look from the third. They buy fish. They move on. Faustus watches them go with the satisfied expression of a man who genuinely enjoys his work. Further along the street, the fruit vendor has arranged her goods in wide, shallow baskets set out on a low table in front of her stall. Late summer figs, deep purple and slightly soft, their skins dusty with the pale bloom that indicates perfect ripeness, the smell of them warm and sweet and concentrated, the kind of smell that reaches you from several paces away and makes you slow down without quite deciding to. Beside the figs, clusters of small, dark grapes, their stems still green and flexible, their surfaces cool and firm to the touch, and quinces, pale gold and slightly rough-skinned, their smell sharp and floral, entirely different from the sweetness of the figs, but equally present, equally insistent. The fruit vendor is a young woman, perhaps 20. Working the stall with the quiet efficiency of someone who learned this trade from a parent and has been doing it long enough to be comfortable with it, but not yet so long as to have stopped noticing its pleasures. She arranges a cluster of grapes with small, careful movements, straightens a basket of figs, steps back to assess the overall arrangement with the brief, practiced eye of someone who cares about how things look. You buy a handful of figs without quite intending to. She wraps them in a fig leaf and hands them across the table with a brief, pleasant smile. You eat one as you continue along the street. It is extraordinary, warm from the morning sun, sweet and dense, and entirely of this place and this moment. The street widens slightly as you approach the crossroads at its center. Here, at the intersection of two market streets, a larger, more informal gathering has accumulated. Not a stall exactly, more of a spontaneous marketplace within the marketplace. A man with a cart has stopped here and is selling pottery directly from the cart bed. Bowls and cups and the small utilitarian vessels of Roman domestic life, stacked and arranged on the cart with the casual confidence of a vendor who knows his prices are good and his goods will sell without elaborate presentation. Beside him, a woman has spread a cloth on the pavement and arranged on it a selection of used items: a bronze clasp, 2 clay lamps of an older style, a small wooden box with a fitted lid, a length of good wool cloth folded carefully, the slightly miscellaneous collection of someone selling things from a household that has acquired more than it needs. She sits on a low stool beside her cloth, her hands folded in her lap, her expression the patient, unhurried expression of someone who is in no particular hurry to sell and is content to wait for the right buyer at the right price. People move through this intersection in a continuous, easy flow, slowing to look at the cart, picking up items from the cloth on the pavement, exchanging a few words with the vendors, moving on. The sound of all of this is layered and continuous and entirely pleasant to stand in the middle of. The voices of the vendors, the responses of the customers, the sound of coins on stone, the sound of pottery being carefully handled, the rumble of a cart somewhere behind you, the splash of the fountain at the near corner, the sound of a door somewhere above you opening and then closing, and beneath all of it, the low, steady hum of a city fully engaged in the business of the middle of the day. You make your way back to Lucia's stall. The midday hour brings a different kind of customer than the morning. The morning customers were largely the domestic managers of their households. Women with cloth bags and specific lists, and the focused efficiency of people with many errands to complete before the heat of the day becomes uncomfortable. The midday customers are different. They are the people of the street itself, the workers and the craftspeople and the vendors taking a brief pause from their own stalls to attend to their own needs, the errand runners and the messengers, the people who eat their midday meal standing at a counter rather than sitting at a table. A man in a dusty tunic stops at Lucia's stall, a craftsman of some kind, his hands bearing the particular stains of his trade. He buys 2 loaves of bread and a small quantity of the sharp, dark olives without breaking his stride. The transaction is over in the time it takes to count 4 coins into the dish. He tears a piece from one of the loaves as he walks away, eating without stopping, already moving back toward wherever he came from. A pair of young men stop and examine the household goods with the slightly unfocused attention of people who are not sure what they need, but are fairly certain they need something. They pick up one of the bronze needles and examine it, set it down, pick up a hair comb, set that down too, eventually buy a small clay lamp and move on with the satisfied expressions of people who have successfully completed an errand they did not entirely understand. Lucia watches all of this with the same calm, steady attention she has brought to every transaction of the morning, serving each customer with the same quiet efficiency, answering questions directly, making recommendations when asked, not pressing, not hurrying. Between customers, she tidies the counter with small, automatic movements, straightening the bread basket, wiping a trace of brine from the surface of the stone beside the olive jars, checking the level of fish sauce in the small ceramic containers, and making a note in the practiced way of someone managing their stock with the careful attention that the difference between a good trading day and a poor one often comes down to. The sun is at its highest point now. The light on the street is at its most direct and most intense, the colors of the painted walls bleached slightly by it, the white plaster surfaces almost too bright to look at directly, the shadow of the stall's awning falling sharp and precise across the counter. Lucia has stretched a length of undyed cloth across the front of the stall on 2 wooden poles, a simple awning that cuts the direct sun from the counter and from her, keeping the olives from warming too quickly in the midday heat, keeping herself from the particular exhaustion of standing in direct southern sun for hours at a time. In the shade beneath it, she stands and works and watches the street, and the street moves past her in its continuous, unhurried, entirely absorbing way. Every face a small story, every transaction a brief connection, every passing figure a thread in the dense, living fabric of a Roman city at the height of its ordinary, unremarkable, entirely extraordinary day. The light is changing. You notice it first on the upper walls of the buildings on the western side of the street, where the direct sun of midday has softened into something warmer and more golden, the ochre and terracotta of the painted plaster deepening in this lower light to colors that are richer and more saturated than they were at noon. The shadows are lengthening again, moving back out from the base of the walls where they contracted through the middle of the day, stretching slowly eastward across the pavement in the long, angled lines of late afternoon sun. The quality of the light is changing by degrees, slowly and continuously, the way the tide changes, the way the seasons change, not in any single moment that you can point to, but in the accumulated effect of many small shifts, each one imperceptible in itself, the whole of them together, transforming the street from the bright, flat light of midday into something altogether more beautiful, more intimate, more golden, more inclined toward rest. The market street is quieter now. The busy midday flow of customers has slowed through the early afternoon to something more intermittent, more leisurely. The people who pass now are not the purposeful shoppers and errand runners of the morning. They are the people of the late afternoon, moving at a different pace, with a different quality of attention. A man strolls past with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at nothing in particular, simply moving through the afternoon with the unhurried pleasure of someone who has completed his day's obligations and is now at liberty to exist without purpose for a while. 2 women walk together slowly on the raised pavement, their conversation easy and continuous, neither of them apparently in any hurry to arrive wherever they are going, the conversation itself seeming to be the destination. Lucia is beginning to close, not abruptly, not all at once, but in the gradual, unhurried way of a vendor who has been at her stall since before dawn and is entitled to finish her day with the same methodical care she began it with. She starts with the household goods on the left side of the counter. The bronze needles and the bone combs and the small clay lamps are gathered from their display positions and carried through to the storage room behind the stall, one careful armful at a time, each item replaced in its designated position on the shelving with the quiet, practiced efficiency of someone who knows exactly where everything goes and why. The remaining fish sauce jars are checked and resealed, the cloth covers tied firmly around their necks, set back on the shelf in the correct order, the fuller jars in front, the depleted ones behind, ready for tomorrow morning's stock assessment. The bread basket is brought in from the counter. 3 loaves remain from the morning's collection, Lucia covers them with a clean cloth and sets them in the cooler part of the storage room. They will be offered at a slight reduction tomorrow morning. Early customers who know her routine sometimes arrive specifically for the previous day's bread. Slightly denser, slightly chewier, preferred by some for exactly those qualities. She lifts the olive jars from their openings in the counter one at a time, checks the level of each, reties the cloth covers, carries them through to the storage room. The large jar of green olives is still well stocked. A good day for the dark ones. The oil-cured black olives nearly finished. She will need to check with her supplier about the next delivery. These assessments happen quietly and automatically, running through her mind in the background of the physical work of closing. The practical calculations of a small business conducted over many years, unsentimental and entirely competent. Outside, the light has shifted again. The sun is lower now, its angle acute enough that the light reaching the street has to travel through a greater thickness of the atmosphere, which strips away the blue and the white and leaves only the warm end of the spectrum. Gold and amber and the faintest suggestion of rose beginning to touch the highest edges of the rooftops. The walls of the buildings across the street are glowing in this light. The terracotta red of the lower sections, a deep, burnished amber. The cream of the upper walls warm and golden, every surface richer and more vivid than at any other point in the day. You stand at the edge of the street and simply watch it happen, the light moving slowly down the walls as the sun continues its descent, transforming everything it touches. Briefly, irreversibly, in the way that beautiful things are always brief and always complete. The sounds of the street have changed along with the light. The market voices have quieted, the calls of the vendors reduced to occasional exchanges between neighboring stall holders, the sound of goods being packed away and shutters being folded back across shop fronts, the rhythm of closing replacing the rhythm of trading. From somewhere further along the street, the sound of a door being closed, then bolted, then silence from that direction. From above you, on one of the upper balconies, the smell of cooking. Something involving onions and herbs and olive oil. The smell of a household preparing its evening meal, rich and warm, and drifting down into the street in slow, dissolving waves. Faustus, across the street, is packing away his fish counter with the energetic efficiency he brings to everything, his large hands moving quickly over the stone, clearing the remaining fish into a covered basket, wiping down the counter with a wet cloth. His voice, usually so prominent a feature of the street's soundscape, quieter now, exchanging a few words with the stallholder beside him, a brief, good-natured exchange. The kind of conversation that happens between neighbors at the end of a shared working day, easy and warm, and requiring very little. He catches Lucia's eye across the street, says something brief. She responds with equal brevity, both of them smiling in the slightly tired, entirely contented way of people who have done a full day's work and are approaching the end of it with satisfaction. The street is emptying by degrees. The steady flow of foot traffic that has moved through the market since before dawn has reduced to something intermittent. A figure here, a small group there, the spaces between them longer now, the pavement visible for longer stretches at a time. A child runs past at a speed entirely inconsistent with the general mood of the late afternoon, its feet slapping on the warm stone, its destination urgent and unknown. It disappears around the corner of the side street without slowing. Then the street is quiet again. Lucia brings the wooden counter panels in from where they have been folded against the side wall all day. She slides them one by one into the slots in the stone threshold and the lintel above, closing the front of the stall with the same careful, practiced movements that opened it this morning, working from one side to the other, each panel fitting into its slot with the slightly sticky resistance of wood that has expanded in the day's warmth. The last panel closes. The stall is shut. She stands for a moment on the pavement outside, looking at the closed front of the stall with the brief, satisfied assessment of someone checking their work. Everything in order. Everything as it should be. Then she goes inside. You follow her into the storage room and through to the small courtyard at the back of the building. A narrow space, open to the sky, walled on three sides by the backs of the surrounding buildings. A single fig tree growing in the corner, its broad leaves casting a soft, dappled shade across the stone floor. A small brazier in the corner of the courtyard, its coals already lit by a neighbor's arrangement. A clay pot resting on the coals, from which the smell of lentils and herbs rises into the warm evening air. Lucia sits on the low stone bench along the wall beneath the fig tree, removes her sandals, sets them beside her with the particular relief of someone who has been standing on stone for many hours. She sits for a moment without moving, her hands in her lap, her eyes half closed, not asleep, simply resting, simply allowing the accumulated tiredness of the day to settle through her and be acknowledged in the way that tiredness needs to be acknowledged before it can begin to release. The fig tree above her moves slightly in a faint evening breeze that has found its way over the surrounding rooftops into this small, enclosed space, its leaves catching the last of the warm light, turning it into a shifting, dappled pattern on the courtyard floor. The smell of the lentils is deepening as the pot warms. Cumin and coriander and the dark, savory richness of legumes that have been soaking since yesterday. The smell of an evening meal approaching its readiness. From the buildings around the courtyard, the sounds of other households settling into their evenings. A voice, a door, the particular sound of pottery being moved on a stone surface, the small domestic percussion of people ending their days in the warm enclosure of their homes. A cat appears at the top of the courtyard wall, sits there for a moment, surveys the space below, descends with the fluid, unhurried grace of a cat that has descended this wall many times before and sees no reason to hurry. It crosses the courtyard floor and settles near the warmth of the brazier without acknowledging either Lucia or you. Lucia stirs the lentils with a long wooden spoon, tastes them, adjusts something, sets the spoon across the top of the pot. From the street beyond the building comes the sound of the city settling into its evening. The market voices entirely gone now, the daytime sounds replaced by something quieter and more interior. The city drawing its activity inward as the light fails, as the working day releases its hold on the streets and the people in them. The sky above the courtyard has deepened from the pale blue of the afternoon to something richer and more complex, a blue that is almost purple at its highest point, shading to amber and gold just above the roofline to the west, where the last of the direct sunlight is still present, fading slowly, beautifully, without urgency. A single star appears just above the eastern roofline, faint at first, then brighter as the sky around it continues to darken. The first star of the evening, present every night at this hour, noticed by Lucia in the way that people notice reliable things, with a quiet, comfortable recognition. She ladles the lentils into a wide ceramic bowl, tears a piece from one of the remaining loaves, sits back down on the bench beneath the fig tree, and she eats her evening meal in the warm, quiet air of the courtyard, slowly and without haste, the bowl warm in her hands, the bread dense and satisfying, the lentils exactly as they should be. The cat shifts slightly closer to the brazier. The fig tree moves gently in the evening breeze. The sky continues its slow, beautiful darkening above the rooflines, and the day releases itself, quietly and completely, into the warm Italian evening. Night comes to Pompeii gently, not with the sudden, complete darkness of the Norse fjord valley, not with the absolute certainty of a place enclosed by steep hillsides on either side, but gradually, softly, in the way of a southern city that releases its warmth slowly into the evening air. That holds the memory of the day's sun in its stone walls and its terracotta roof tiles long after the sun itself has gone. The sky above the city deepens through its stages unhurriedly, the amber and rose of the sunset fading first from the highest reaches of the sky, replaced by a deepening blue that moves downwards slowly, like water filling a vessel from above. The blue deepening to violet, the violet deepening toward the particular dark of a clear Mediterranean night, richly, softly dark, not the hard darkness of a clouded sky, but the luminous, star-filled dark of a sky with nothing between it and you but clear, warm air. The stars appear one by one, then in clusters, then all at once. They are extraordinary tonight. The sky above Pompeii on a clear summer night is among the finest in the Roman world, far enough from the concentrated lamplight of Rome to retain its depth, high enough above the coastal haze to be entirely clear, each star distinct and unwavering, the whole of them together forming the ancient, reliable map that the people of this city have read since childhood. The Milky Way emerges last, as it always does, appearing not suddenly but gradually, becoming visible as the sky darkens fully around it, a broad, softly luminous band arching from the southern horizon to the northern, its light so diffuse and so gentle that it seems less like light than like a quality of the darkness itself, a darkness that glows slightly, that is luminous rather than merely dark. You stand in the street and look up at it and feel, as anyone must feel who stands beneath a truly dark sky and looks up honestly at what is there, the particular quality of smallness and completeness that such a sky produces. The sense of being located, of being a small, warm, entirely specific point in something vast and beautiful and entirely indifferent. It is not an uncomfortable feeling. It is, in fact, deeply restful. The moon has risen above the eastern edge of the city, a full moon, or nearly full, its disk enormous and pale as it clears the rooftops of the buildings on the eastern side of the street, its light falling into the city with the quiet authority of something that has been doing this every month since long before the city existed and will continue doing it long after. The moonlight transforms the street. The basalt paving stones, dark and unremarkable in daylight, become in this light a surface of extraordinary subtlety, each stone catching the moonlight differently, some reflecting it almost directly, others absorbing it into their dark surfaces and returning only a faint pewter luminescence, the whole street a shifting, complex surface of silver and shadow that has nothing to do with its daytime self. The painted walls of the buildings are different in moonlight too. The deep terracotta red appears almost black. The cream and white plaster takes the moonlight and holds it, glowing softly against the darker colors around it. The painted inscriptions on the walls, still readable in this light, their red and black lettering sharp against the pale plaster. The street is empty, or nearly empty. A figure moves at the far end of the street, walking slowly, a man returning home from somewhere, his sandals making a soft, irregular sound on the paving stones, growing fainter as he moves away, then gone, then silence, the particular silence of a Roman city at night, which is different from the silence of the countryside, different from the silence of the fjord, different from the silence of the Egyptian desert. It is an inhabited silence, a silence that contains within it the presence of many thousands of sleeping people, of fires banked and lamps extinguished, and households folded inward into their private darkness. It is the silence of a city dreaming. The fountains are still running. This is one of the things about Pompeii at night that is different from most places in the ancient world. The aqueduct does not stop at nightfall. The water continues to flow through the lead pipes beneath the streets and up into the stone basins at the intersections. The sound of it continuous and unchanged from morning to midnight to the darkest hour before dawn. You walk toward the nearest fountain and stand beside it in the moonlight. The water falls in its usual arc into the basin, its sound the same as it was this morning, steady and gentle and entirely unconcerned with the hour. The basin full and still except for the small disturbance at the point where the water enters, spreading outward in slow rings that reach the stone walls of the basin and dissolve. The moonlight catches the falling water and gives it a brief, intermittent silver quality. Each droplet distinct for a fraction of a second in the moonlight before it rejoins the surface of the basin and disappears. You stand beside it for a long time, listening to the water, feeling the cool air that rises from it, looking at the moonlit street reflected in the still surface of the basin beyond the entry point, the buildings upside down in the water, the stars visible between them, the whole sky reproduced in miniature in this small stone basin at the corner of a sleeping street. The city around you is entirely at rest. From the upper floors of the buildings, occasional sounds drift down into the street, small and domestic and entirely unthreatening. The sound of someone turning in their sleep, a brief, drowsy voice, then silence again. The sound of a shutter being adjusted, wood on wood, then stillness. From somewhere further away in the city, the sound of a dog, a single unhurried bark, followed by silence, followed, after a long pause, by a response from a different direction, also unhurried, also single, as if the two dogs are having a slow, intermittent conversation across the sleeping city, with long, comfortable silences between each contribution. A cat moves along the top of a garden wall, visible for a moment in the moonlight, silent and entirely purposeful, following some nocturnal agenda that has nothing to do with the sleeping humans on either side of the wall. It reaches the end of the wall and drops silently to the other side and is gone. You walk slowly back along the street toward Lucia's building. The stall front is closed, the wooden panels fitted firmly in their slots, the painted panel on the counter front barely visible in the moonlight, the large stone counter cold and smooth and empty. You look up at the upper floor. The window of Lucia's room is dark, the small clay lamp extinguished, the shutter pulled to against the night air. She is asleep. She has been awake since long before dawn. She has stood at her counter through the full heat of the midday sun. She has served her customers with the same calm, steady efficiency from the first transaction of the morning to the last of the afternoon. She has packed away her stock and prepared for tomorrow, and eaten her evening meal in the quiet of her courtyard. And now she is asleep, on her sleeping mat in the small room above the stall, in the building on the corner of the street that she has known for 12 years, in the city that she was born in and has never had particular reason to leave. Her breathing slow and even, her hands still at last after a full day of motion, her face in the darkness of the room as smooth and uncomplicated as it was when she was a child. The working day released entirely. The commerce and the calculation and the careful management of stock and customer and coin, all set aside until morning. She will wake before the sun. She will descend the creaking stairs in the lamplight. She will check her stock and collect her bread and arrange her stall with the same practiced care. She will stand at her counter and serve her customers and watch the street and tend the small, specific world of her corner of the market, as she has done every day for 12 years. But that is tomorrow. Tonight she sleeps, and the city sleeps around her. The moon has climbed higher, its light less orange now that it has risen fully above the rooflines, cooler and more silver, falling straight down into the streets rather than at the low, warm angle of the rising moon. The shadows it casts are shorter and sharper than they were an hour ago, the city more clearly visible, more legible. The streets and the buildings and the fountains and the closed stall fronts, all precise and still in the moonlight. Mount Vesuvius is visible above the northern roofline, its broad, dark profile against the slightly lighter sky, its slopes invisible at this hour, its summit a soft, rounded silhouette, entirely still, entirely silent, simply there, as it always is, as it has always been. The city at its feet is quiet. The 11,000 people of Pompeii are asleep in their homes and their rented rooms and their sleeping platforms and their fine beds in their painted houses with their marble floors and their garden courtyards, all of them breathing in the slow, even rhythm of sleep, all of them released from the day's work and the day's commerce and the day's small negotiations and transactions and conversations, all of them dreaming, perhaps, in the warm darkness of a summer night in Campania, the warmth of the stone still present in the walls around them, the sound of the fountains still present in the streets outside, the smell of the city at night drifting through the shuttered windows, cool and complex and entirely their own. Let that warmth reach you now, the warmth of the stone walls of this ancient city, still holding the day's sun, releasing it slowly into the night air, into the street, into this moment. Let the sound of the fountain carry you, that soft, continuous sound of water falling into stone, steady and gentle and entirely without urgency. The sound that has been present in this street every night for as long as the city has stood, that will be present tomorrow night and the night after, always the same, always here. Let the moonlight fall across you where you stand, cool and silver and entirely calm, the same moonlight that falls on the rooftops of Pompeii and the slopes of the mountain above it and the dark surface of the Bay of Naples beyond. The same moonlight that has fallen on this place every clear night since before any of this existed. Let the city hold you in its sleeping warmth. The streets are quiet. The stalls are closed. The vendors are asleep. The customers are asleep. The children and the cats and the dogs and the fig trees in their courtyards and the water in the stone basins and the wine in its amphora and the olives in their jars, all of it resting, all of it continuing in its own patient way through the quiet hours. Lucia is asleep, the city is asleep, and the night is warm, and the stars are bright, and the fountain is running, and the mountain stands against the sky as it always has, and everything is exactly as it should be. Sleep now. Thank you for listening. New stories every week.